This is Note-Taking Guide 2.3 for Math 1. Today, we are going to learn how to solve inequalities. So I just want to remind you that we're going to do exactly the same thing that we do when we have an equation. So we're just going to pretend kind of like this is an equal sign right here and not worry about it too much. There is one rule that applies about flipping that inequality sign, but we're not going to talk about that until we get to it. So let's just solve this like it's an equal sign, and then just kind of go from there. So my goal always is to get the variable by itself. So I want to get this x by itself. It's immediately attached to the 8. So I have to keep it together until I can get rid of that minus 3. How do I get rid of the minus 3? I add the 3 to the other side. So we're going to add that 3 to the other side to cancel it over here. And I'm going to go 8x, and I'm still going to use the less than or equal to sign. And then 29 plus 3 is 32. Now again, still treating that just like it was an equal sign, I'm going to continue to solve this. I have 8x is less than or equal to 32. How do I get the 8 off the x? Well, 8 is multiplied by x, so I have to divide by 8. So I get x, because this would just be 1x here, is less than or equal to, and then 32 divided by 8 is 4. One thing I forgot to do on this note-taking guide was to make sure that I put some line graphs there for you to graph your solutions on. They are there on the homework page, but let's just graph this really fast. So I'm just going to throw some numbers on my graph. So here's 4, here's 5, here's 6, here's 3. And I'm just going to graph this. So if I'm graphing this, the very first thing that I want to do is I need to decide if I'm going to have an open circle or a closed-in circle at the number 4. So because of this equal to sign down here right below here, that tells me that I'm going to have a solid dot at 4. If the equal to sign was missing, it would be an open dot. So my goals, my two things I can either do is a solid dot like this or an open dot like this. It's solid like this when it's equal to, and it's open like that when it's not equal to. So because of the equal to, it's solid. And then I want to shade all of my answers that would be less than 4. So less than 4 would be 3, and then 2, and then 1. So I'm actually going to shade my graph this direction for the visualization of what my solutions are. So there's my first inequality done. Okay, let's look at our next one. Okay, our next inequality here we have is 6 minus x divided by 4 is greater than or equal to 14. So again, just like when we were solving equations, I want to kind of just look at what I got to get rid of. Well, here's my variable right here right now. So I got to get rid of that 6 that's hanging out over there. So the very first thing I'm going to do to get rid of that 6 is positive, so I'm going to subtract it to the other side. So 6 minus 6 cancels to 0. I'll have a negative x divided by 4 on this side, and is greater than or equal to, and then on the other side 14 minus 6 is 8. Alright, so again, still trying to get that x by itself. In this case it's a negative x, but we're going to get it by itself first by getting rid of that 4 on the bottom. That 4 on the bottom is divided. The opposite of division is multiply, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 4 to get that to cancel out. So over here now I have a negative x is greater than or equal to, and then 8 times 4 is 32. Now I almost have x by itself, but it's not completely by itself. And I just want to make a point here for you for just a minute. That says negative x, but it's really like having a negative 1 out in front there. Lots of times people get confused with what they're going to do with that negative x, but what would you do if it was a negative 1 out front? You're timesing by negative 1. Well, how do you get rid of times by negative 1? You divide by negative 1. So right here on this spot now, we're going to just divide by a negative 1. If I divide both sides by negative 1, then this would be negative 1 divided by negative 1, which is just going to be 1, and I can have an x here. Now here comes the rule that I was telling you about. The rule says anytime you divide or multiply by a negative, you have to flip the inequality sign. So if it's greater than, you have to make it less than. If it's less than, you have to make it greater than. So here's our sign. It was greater than or equal to. Because I divided by a negative, I have to flip it the opposite direction and make it less than. Then I just continue with my math. So 32 divided by -1 is a -32. So again, the rule says anytime you multiply or divide by that negative number, you have to flip the inequality sign. Okay, so keep that in mind as you go through your homework today. All right, next problem. Now this problem is one of those kinds of problems where we have variables on both sides. When that happens, the very first thing we want to do is isolate the variables on one side together. So we need to move those to one side. I want to get rid of this x over here and move it to the other side. So how am I going to get rid of a positive x? Well, to get rid of the positive x, I'm going to subtract it. So subtract an x to the other side. 4x minus x is 3x. I still have a -7. I have greater than. Those x's canceled out. And then I have a +5. Now that I have all of the variables on one side together, I can just continue to solve it like normal. So the first thing I'm going to do if I need to get that x by itself is to add the 7 to the other side. So I have 3x is greater than 12 because 5 plus 7 is 12. 3 times x, to get rid of the 3, I have to divide both sides by 3. So I get x is greater than 4 because 12 divided by 3 is 4. Again, I guess I forgot to graph that last one for you, so let me remind you how we're going to graph that. If we're here at 4, this would be 5, 3. You can put lots of numbers or just a few. That's fine with me. So this time, because there's not an equal to sign there, at the number 4, I'm going to put an open dot. It would be closed in if it was equal to, it's open if it's not. And then I'm going to have for my solutions, all of my solutions are greater than 4. So I'm going to draw my arrow and shade in the direction that's greater than 4. 5 is greater than 4, 6 is greater than 4, 7 is greater than 4. So my answer would be that part in yellow that I shaded. Okay. Next one. We're going to solve this one. So we've got to first go through and distribute that -3 that's out front. So -3 times 2x is a -6x. -3 times a -5 is a +15. And still then I have the less than or equal to 3. Then I'm just going to continue to solve this by isolating the variable. So I'm going to subtract that 15 over to the other side. I get a -6x is less than or equal to a -12. Divide both sides by a -6. Now remember the rule. If you divide or multiply by a negative number, the very first thing you have to do is flip that inequality sign. So instead of less than or equal to, now it's greater than or equal to. So this cancels over here to just be 1x. And then over here on the other side, -12 divided by -6 is a +2. So then we're going to graph that really fast. Not very good straight line here that I just drew, but it will work. Because of the equal to sign, I'm going to put a solid dot at the 2. So here's my solid dot. It doesn't want to be solid. And then my answers that says are greater than or equal to 2. Greater than is in this direction. So I'm shading this direction. All right, they just keep getting harder really is what's happening here. So this next one, again, we're just distributing that 2 through the parentheses, isolating the variables, getting it by itself, solving the equation. So 2 times 4x is 8x. 2 times the -7 is a -14. I still have that 5x out in front. And I still have that greater than 90 back behind. Anytime I have variables that are the same on the same side, I'm just going to combine them together with the signs that are in front of them. So I have a +5x and a +8. So 5 and 8 add to 13. So I have 13x minus 14 is greater than 90. And I'm just going to solve from there. I got to get that 13x by itself, so I'm going to add that 14 to the other side. When I do that, I get 13x is greater than 104. To To get rid of the 13, I'm going to divide both sides by 13. Now I'm dividing by a positive number, so I don't have to flip the inequality sign. So I'm going to do 104 divided by 13, and when I do that, I get 8. So my answer is x is greater than 8. I would throw that on a graph really quick. So 8, 9, 10, I'm going to throw on 7 and 6. Because this does not have the equal to sign, it will be an open circle at 8. All of my solutions are greater than 8, so I go in the greater than direction, and that would be my solution in graphed form. All right, again, just a little bit worse than the one before. We just keep getting harder and harder, but that's okay. It's going to be just fine. So the very first thing we're going to do is distribute that 4 through. So we're going to have that 3x. This negative 4 times x is a negative 4x. This negative 4 times 5 is a negative 20. It's greater than or equal to a negative 14. So again, now we have x's on the same side together, so we're just going to combine them. 3x minus 4x is a negative 1x. So I have negative 1x minus 20 is greater than or equal to a negative 14. I need those x's by itself, so the first thing I got to get rid of is that 20. It's subtracted, so to get rid of subtract, I'm going to add it to the other side. I get a negative 1x is greater than or equal to a positive 6. I have to get rid of that negative 1 in front of the x, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. Right now you should have like a big alarm going off in your head that says I'm dividing by negative 1. When that happens, I have to flip the inequality sign. So over here I get a positive x, I flip the inequality sign, and 6 divided by negative 1 is a negative 6. Then when you just throw that on your graph, to graph, you're here negative 6. This direction would be negative 7, negative 8. This direction would be negative 5, negative 4. We're going to be a solid dot at negative 6 because of the equal to sign. And we're going less than direction because it says my x's are less than or equal to that. So less than would be to the direction where those negative numbers are getting bigger. All right. 2 last problems I'm going to do for you today because the last part of this worksheet is a checkpoint where you're supposed to try them yourself. So the last 2 problems on here that aren't on the checkpoint say define a variable, write an inequality, and solve each problem. So G says the product, first of all, let's remember that product means multiply, of 6 and a number. So we're multiplying 6 and a number. I'm going to call the number n. I just like to use n for a number. Is no more than 48. That means it can't be 49, it can't be 50, it can't be 51, so it has to be less than or equal to 48 because it says it can't be more than 48. So there's my inequality that I wrote. It does say solve it, so I'm going to divide both sides by 6. And I get n is less than or equal to 8 for my solution. The next one says negative 23, so negative 23 is at least the difference of 9 and twice a number. So at least the difference, I'm going to do the 9 and twice a number. So the difference of 9 and twice a number would be 9 minus 2n. So it says negative 23 is at least, so that means it's the smallest part it's going to be. So negative 23 is going to be the smallest it can be, which means that this 9 minus 2n has to be greater than or equal to the 23. So some people get confused on this part because you're like, well, you just wrote a less than symbol for that. But I needed this part over here to be bigger than negative 23. So I needed the alligator mouth to open to the side that needed to be bigger. So even though it looks like I wrote a less than sign there, when I needed that 9 minus 2n to be bigger than negative 23, I needed it to open up to negative 23. All right, you guys, thanks for watching today. Good luck with your homework. Make sure you do that checkpoint also on your own today before you move on to your homework assignment.